Hello there, great to see you back on the channel. Today I want to talk about compression and mainly about the types of compression or the types of compressor, because I know they can be confusing, knowing which one is the best to use where, that kind of thing, how each one sounds and how to choose the right one. And today, if Jessie will let me, we are going to talk a little bit deeper about that. And what I'm going to try and do today is demonstrate the qualities of each one or the characteristics of each one. So today what I'm going to try and do is just make it a little bit clearer for you on the differences between, this is going to be tricky, between optical, VCA, Vari Mu, FET and diode bridge compressors. Now this video isn't only about the different compressor types, because that can be done quite quickly. What I want to do in this video is give you some examples of places that you can use them to make the most out of their unique characteristics. And I'm going to talk about my favourite places to use certain ones, and then I'm just going to give you some general kind of a standard overview on where that type of compressor is typically used. But the thing with compression, at least for me, is yes, it's about dynamic range control, but it's also about tone and attitude and rhythm, energy, movement, all those kind of words. So as ever, my goal is really to help you stop overthinking choosing a compressor. That's what the point of this video is. It might go a little bit longer than most on YouTube, but with me, it's all about why and the decision-making process. So that's what I'm going to try and impart to you on this video. So whilst I confess, I might hold my hand up to say I don't know the exact workings of each and every compressor type, I've got an understanding of that, of a broad understanding of how they work. But more importantly for me is how they sound, the characteristics, how they change sound, how they can enhance particular instruments. So that's what is more important to me really than understanding or knowing all the technicalities. With that attitude, I think it helps stop the overthinking and just simplifies the whole process. How does it sound? What's it going to do to my instrument? Why am I choosing this particular compressor? All those key questions. So let's dive into it. First one I want to talk about is Vari Mu, or sometimes called a tube compressor. These are I think it's safe to say, the earliest design of compressor, the first compressors that we started to see in studios in the 50s and 60s. It's what you hear on all the Beatles records from about the mid-60s onwards. It's that familiar vintage, warm tone that was just ubiquitous across recordings throughout the 60s. The way they work is that they use tubes or valves, if you're in the UK, to apply gain reduction to the circuit depending on the input signal. The ratio on them is variable and they are what's called program dependent. So the way the attack and release work, the way the ratio is applied, that is all dependent on the signal coming into the compressor, the amplitude of it and the characteristic of it, if it's transient heavy or if it's smooth sounding. Typically, Vari Mu compressors or tube compressors have what's called a soft knee compression versus a hard knee compression. And what that means is that it just applies compression in a really gentle, natural way, and it's not quite so impactful when it is applied. Typically, the attack and release are on the slower side or medium to slow side, so not particularly fast acting in the way that compression initially starts or the way that it is released. It's very smooth, and so it's great for smoothing out peaks in a performance. If there's a performance that is a little bit uneven, then it will help smoothen that out. More so, they're known for their character, their tonal character being warm, thick, gluey. It's quite sort of soft and fluffy sounding. As I said earlier, it's just really recognisable on those more vintage early records from the Beatles, Motown. That hopefully gives you an idea of what we're talking about here. The most well-known compressors in this category are the Fairchild, and then the other one is the Manley Vari Mu. There are many plugins out there that emulate or model this style of compression. Most commonly, you will see Vari Mu compressors or the Fairchild compressor, let's say, on a mix bus. And as I said earlier, not so much for the dynamic range control, but more for its character, the warmth, the glue, that kind of thing. So a great place for it, apart from the mix bus, it would make sense to think of perhaps your group buses, your major instrument group buses, things like guitars maybe. But my favourite place to use it is on my orchestra bus or my strings bus. And what it's great for is taking away some of the sharp edges of strings, you know, particularly violins, can really smooth out those performances. So let's have a look what I've got here to try and demonstrate this for you. I've got a set of strings. I've got them all routed to an auxiliary, and on the auxiliary I've got the UAD version of the Fairchild. This is the 670 model. Let's just bypass that for the minute and let's just listen to these strings. Okay, so there's a double bass there as well to bring some low end warmth into the part. Let's see how I would use this Fairchild then and hopefully help you hear the character of it. Initially, when you open this compressor, it might feel a little bit daunting. Just don't worry about it. The main points to consider with this compressor is that there's no ratio for you to worry about, which is a plus. And the main controls that you have really are just this input gain section here. You've got left channel and right channel. And then similarly, you've got a left threshold and a right threshold. The other main parameter here are these time constants. And these are, there are 6 points and each point has got a different setup with regard to attack time and release time. This is here for its tone, and the reason that I use it on strings is because I want that warm character, that slightly fuzzy around the edges character to wrap around the strings. Let's see if I can try and demonstrate this for you. I'll play through and then I'll bring it in. Now, granted, that is pretty subtle, but what I hear or what I'm listening for is that bass, is that double bass, and listening for how the low frequencies of it feel a little bit more extended and slightly larger in size. Let's start from where the double bass comes in. So I've basically there just added some more input gain, which is how you can generate more harmonic content in a Vari Mu compressor. Harmonic content is really great for just thickening out the sound, adding harmonics to the signal that weren't in the original recording. And then I just cranked up the threshold to get more gain reduction happening. And I took down the sidechain filter, so the low frequencies, the double bass frequencies were exciting the compressor all the more. So let's just run through that again very quickly. So hopefully you heard that when I bypassed the compressor, the strings just didn't feel quite as warm. And that's the whole point of using this particular type of compressor for me on strings. The places to consider using this would be, think about things like strings, synth pads, guitars even for that warmth and to soften some transient information, and vocals. Remember, they're great for smoothing out performances, any peaky performances, either from transients or from level. So listen to your source. If you feel as though that's something that needs controlling, a Vari Mu might be your go-to compressor in that instance. The next type of compressor I want to talk about is an optical compressor. These came a little bit later, after the Vari Mu or the tube compressors. This is one of my favourite types of compressor to use because they are just so quick and easy to apply. Once you know which instruments they work particularly well on, really, really easy to apply. For a more in-depth look at optical compression, there is a video on the channel about compressing acoustic guitar, and I'll link to that at the end for you to go and have a closer look at to see that in operation. But what I'll do today is quickly show you it on a piano. The most famous optical compressors, I guess, are the LA2A or the LA3A. LA2A is a tube compressor, or it uses tubes. The LA3A is a solid state compressor, so its tonal characteristic is slightly different. The tube compressor, warmer sounding. The solid state optical compressor is more has got more mid-forward character to it. And the way optical compression works is using light. So there's actually a light inside the compressor, a light bulb or a light source that an optical cell picks up the intensity of that light and uses that to control the attenuation of the signal. So the brighter the light, the more attenuation happens. And like a Vari Mu, the optical compressor is kind of like an averaging compressor. It smooths out the peaks to just create a more rounded out performance or evenly balanced performance, smoothing out a signal. And I think they're reasonably similar in terms of attack and release to a Vari Mu as well. Obviously, these things change depending on the model that we're talking about. There are more modern iterations of these styles of compressors where they can give you more control over attack and release. So I'm just talking generally here. Most commonly used on vocals, bass guitar and acoustic guitar. Great for smoothing out performances. They just help things sit better in the mix without drawing attention to the compression itself. So very natural sounding. An optical compressor is like your chilled out mate that just wants everything to sound nice. Okay. So I really enjoy using these types of compressors. So let me show you that on a piano. This piano is kind of a jazz piano, a jazz style, which I've used on previous videos. And I've got here the CLA2A from Waves. Quite subtle again. The performance of this piece is quite dynamic in this part. So it's just helping to tuck those peaks in a little bit and bring the more quieter parts of the performance closer to those peaks as well. So it just feels a little bit thicker, a little bit rounder. I've tried my best to level match these examples. Let's try this section here. Let's exaggerate it a little bit. So listen to the thickness. It's the thickness, the low mid enhancement that you get from the harmonics that tube compressors bring to a sound. Harmonics being tones that are added that aren't in the original recording. This helps make the instrument feel bigger, like it takes up more space. The compression I've got dialed in here on this piano is too much, but that is on purpose to show you, or to help you hear the tone of this particular compressor. And hopefully you can hear that thickness, that warmth that it adds, and that smoothing effect that it has across the performance. That's the optical compressor. This is the first compressor I reached for when compressing pianos and acoustic guitars. And on vocals, I use it in series with a FET compressor. So let's look at that next. We start to shift things out now away from those original compressors. We start getting into a little bit more sort of aggressive territory now with the FET compressor. FET stands for Field Effect Transistor. Most famously, this is the 1176 compressor, of which there are several iterations and tons of different versions of this in plug-in form. These are, as I said, a bit more aggressive. They're known for being fast, very fast in the way that they can attack and release the signal. They are very punchy, exciting. The attack and release times on these compressors are measured in microseconds versus milliseconds. That can really change the sound, the envelope of the sound and the character of the original recording. A very aggressive, very upfront character. But it doesn't need to be used like that. That's just an option that you've got. And most commonly, this type of compressor used in that aggressive way is heard on drums. Room mics in particular can be treated with the 1176 in such a way that it just brings up the ambience and excitement. I'll show you that in a second. Very efficient at knocking down the peaks on a dynamic vocal performance, followed up then by the LA2A or similar to smooth out the resulting vocal, to give you this really controlled vocal that doesn't sound over compressed. But my favourite way, or one of my favourite ways to use this compressor, is actually on electric guitars, just to bring a little bit more body to the sound. I like electric guitars in rock music to sound powerful. So I like to make sure that the lower frequencies of the guitar isn't compromised in any way. And after controlling the low frequencies in a guitar signal, I'll often use an 1176 or an LA3A, so an optical compressor in that instance, just to bring a bit more warmth and a bit more body into the guitar, make it feel bigger, make it take up more room in the mix. Let's have a look at that. Let's just take this guitar part. Let's put an 1176 on it. Let's just take the attack all the way to its slowest and the release to its fastest. Let's just get a little bit of gain reduction happening here. Okay, just quickly set that up. It's on a 4:1 ratio, and I'm just looking for 3 dBs of gain reduction here. I'm using this to, yes, even out the tones or even out the performance somewhat, but I just want to thicken the guitars up. I'll start with it bypass and then bring it in. Okay, just makes the guitar feel a little bit bigger, got a little bit more heft to it. Brings a bit more sustain to the sound as well. Let's take a little bit to the extreme. Nice, really nice in rock guitars to use this compressor for that purpose. Let's look at this in the vocal scenario. You can see just by looking at the waveform on this that this is quite dynamic performance. Let's just take a listen to that.
I feel my lungs explode with a massive forward dose, all the pressure pushing me down.
And then with an 1176 to take the peaks.
I feel my lungs explode with a massive forward dose.
That's set up so that it's actually activating or acting like a limiter. Set up at 20:1 ratio with a fast attack, fast release. So it can grab the peak and let go. This is quite a sustained section of the vocal. Let's look at something, say here. Maybe we've got that peak there. See what the compressor does on that.
Don't know if I can swim any longer.
Okay, so you saw it grabbing that peak there. So it's going to just tap that peak down. And that's then followed by the optical compressor, the LA2A. This just does some gentle smoothing.
But hey, I'm coming around. I feel my lungs explode with a massive forward dose, all the pressure pushing me down.
It just feels like it's a smoother performance, more controlled, more even sounding as well. And it's also adding a sense, again, that sense of warmth, that sense of heft to the vocal, which is really important in rock vocals. So that's the way that you can use compressors in series on a vocal to get a natural sounding, controlled sounding result. Let's look at using a FET compressor on drums. Okay, let's just hear what the room mics are contributing to this mix. So they're playing a major part in how this drum kit sounds. A trick with the 1176 to bring more excitement into a drum recording is to compress the room mics. So you bring up all that sort of ambience, roomy sound, and that just makes it feel like the drummer's just playing with a bit more excitement, a bit more loudly. What can an 1176 do to that? What it's doing is it's bringing up all the in-between stuff, the sustain, the room reverb, the natural room reverb, bringing everything closer together to create this more energetic sound. What's that sound like in the drum mix? If I bypass this compressor and then bring it in. Okay, really exciting, really simple to set up as well. Just happen to choose an 8:1 ratio, slow attack, fast release, and you can go even more extreme if you went to 20:1. Okay, I did the all buttons in trick there as well. That's literally how what you do. You click all the buttons in, which you could do on the hardware unit with your 4 fingers to get an even more aggressive sound. Let's exaggerate that. See what that does to the mix. I bypass it and then bring it in. Okay, drastically changes the envelope of the sound. Great fun. You can get really creative with this. It's such a versatile compressor in that sense. You don't have to use it aggressively, as I've shown with the electric guitars. And as well as electric guitars and drums, it's great on vocals and a whole host of instruments. The way to think about this compressor would be knowing how aggressive it can be and what it can do to the sustain of the signal. Then this might be one that you would reach for when thinking about rock vocals, rock guitars and drums. You would use this when you wanted a signal to cut through the mix, when you wanted to control the transient aspect of it a little bit more than you can with the previous types of compressors we've looked at, particularly if they're quite sharp transients because of the super fast nature of the attack control. Let's move on to VCA compression. I'm going to stick with the drums here for this. So how is VCA compression different? It's solid state circuitry. VCA stands for voltage controlled amplifier. And this gives you detailed control of attack and release so that you can get really precise with reshaping a signal. In terms of its tone and behaviour, they are really very fast, clean, so not as coloured as we've heard in the previous three types. But that's a good thing because it works really well with things like distortion if you wanted to add that after the fact. You can use them to add punch or the gluey factor. This is often used in consoles, and you may probably be very familiar with the SSL bus compressor, which is a VCA compressor. Every track or every channel on an SSL console has a VCA compressor. It has the ability to be very transparent or very aggressive depending on the settings that you use. Typically used on mix bus, typically used on drum buses, but you can use the things anywhere. Anything that's got high transient to it, like the piano, for example. And my favourite way to use them is on a drum bus. And I also love using the DBX 160, which is another VCA compressor on drums as a parallel for the kick and snare. And I'll show you that in a second. A lot of the compressors that we're talking about today, I do enjoy very much using in a parallel context. So I'll touch on those a little later on as well. Let's look at these drums again then. And let's try VCA compressor. Let's try the distressor. The distressor is well known for being one of the first choices as a drum compressor, either on the bus or individual tracks, like the kick and the snare. When we look at the interface, we've got the ratio selections here. Nuke is, I believe, the equivalent, or perhaps equivalent isn't the right word, but it is, think of the all buttons in mode on the 1176, but I think it does it in its own special way. It's got some distortion, coloration that you can add to the sound. It's got some high-pass filters there if you wanted to use those. And you can manipulate the detector circuit or the EQ of the detector circuit by selecting this parameter here to add a sort of an exaggerated bump to the detector circuit. I'm going to switch this out here and then I'll bring it in. You can hear it on the snare, it brings up the snare all the more. What I'll do is I do have some snare reverb in place, just to exaggerate the length of the snare. Let's just play it through again without the reverb. I'll switch it off and then bring it in. Great, it just sounds great on drums. Another way that I like to use a VCA compressor is as a parallel. So let's have a look at that. This is the DBX160 from UAD, but the Waves do a version as well, which is also great. It's very common to have a mono parallel compression track for your kick and your snare to blend back into the drum mix. Let's take the level of the parallel, just fade it out. And initially, I just want to kind of set up the DBX160. I'm usually looking for about 5 to 10 dBs of gain reduction in a parallel scenario. Looks about right. Let's start fading this up and see what it brings to the drum mix. Let's mute it and I'll bring it back in. And it does it in such a way that it adds a sense of clarity, forwardness, punch to the kick and snare, which again is great for rock. And of course you can blend a parallel into any amount suitable to the style of music that you're mixing. That is one of my all-time favourite ways to use a VCA compressor. Where this differs is that the attack and release are program dependent. Going right back to our first examples of the Vari Mu and the optical. So it just makes it really easy to apply. Another parallel scenario that I love to use using a VCA compressor and the DBX160 again is on bass guitar. And I just want to share this little chain with you. So we have a DBX160 here set up on a bass parallel, followed by an EQP1A Pultec. And what this does is you've got your compressed bass signal is then being enhanced by a healthy boost at 60 Hertz and a healthy boost at 3K. This little chain I picked up from watching Joe Ciccarelli work, and I just love using it on bass guitar. Let me demonstrate that for you. Got a bass track here. Followed by a bass distortion. And so let's bring in this parallel bass. You can hear how wonderfully warm and full that sounds. The bass, yes, the bass track's quite noisy, but that's a topic for another day. And in terms of gain reduction on the DBX160, this is what I'm looking at. Okay, and what you can do then, you can fine tune how low, how deep those frequencies go by going back to the Pultec and just adjusting the boost here. The boost here at 3K is all about articulation and bringing the finger noise out, which is something I love to do on bass so that you can really feel it and sense it in the mix and hear what the bass player is playing, which is very important. What I want to do next is talk about the final compressor type, which is diode bridge. And I'm going to do that by demonstrating it on some guitars. But before I do that, I just want to finish demonstrating this bass because it does match up with the guitars. Now, if I mute the parallel bass, yes, there's a level drop there, as you would expect with parallel compression. When you use parallel compression, you have to bear that in mind with your gain staging throughout the mix. But again, that's a topic for another video. Top favourite way to use a VCA compressor, namely the DBX160 on bass parallel. Okay, diode bridge compression. This is less common than any of the other types of compressor we've spoken about so far. It's found in classic equipment, typically the Neve, and you can find it in plugins such as the 33609 compressor, which I use the UAD version. There is a Lindell version from Plugin Alliance, the 254 compressor, that is the same type, a diode bridge. This compressor uses diodes to control the gain. In terms of tone and behaviour, again, on this compressor, it's all about weight, thickness. They're pretty coloured. Not the fastest, but they've got loads of punch. And it's got its own sort of unique harmonic character to it. The saturation that it can impart to signals is very, very pleasing. It's really very nice indeed. Typically, you would see this used on drums, very popular as a drum parallel, on the drum bus as well, which is how I like to use it. And it's great on guitars, great for adding bite to rock guitars as well as weight. So I like to use, my favourite way to use this type of compressor is on a guitar parallel, and that's for electrics, and I will send acoustic to that as well if I've got a mix that's got, you know, electrics and acoustics, and the acoustic needs to cut through, then it will go to this parallel compressor. And then I like to use it on the drum bus. And the reason for that is it's kind of like a really good blend, a happy mix of getting that punch and bite, but it's still got a vintage vibe to it, but it's not as kind of fluffy and warm as, say, the Vari Mu or a tube compressor. So let's have a look at that on guitars. I'm going to show you this guitar parallel. I've got to give a shout out to Joe Carroll here for this, because I think I picked it up from one of his videos a few years ago where he used the 254. This just sounds amazing on guitars. I love it. Got a set of guitars here, you've just heard them, but I've muted the bass, and this is the guitar parallel track here. It's faded out at the moment. Let me just play these guitars so you can see what sort of gain reduction I'm applying. Now, the reason I've got this set up the way I have is that what I want from a guitar parallel is weight, probably a bit more in terms of loudness as well. And I want to smoothen out the guitars. I want the guitars to feel less spiky and more smooth. And the way that I've done that is, or the way that you can do that, is just by going for a slower release or recovery time. So something like 400 or 800 milliseconds really just smooths out the guitars and makes them just feel a little bit more solid. You don't get any fluctuations. It just feels like a really good foundational weight or heaviness to the guitars. Let me bring this into the guitars here so you can hear that happening. Sounds really good. I love using this as a parallel guitar compressor. In terms of a drum compressor on your drum bus, the magic recovery number is to set it at 100 milliseconds. Let's jump a little bit and let me show you that. I wasn't planning on doing this on this video, but now I really want to show this to you. I showed you this with the distressor, with the VCA style compression, Let's try this with the 33609. Take it to 3-1. Bring the gain down just back to 0, but then up a notch, and then bring the recovery round to 100, and then take the threshold all the way up. Let's just play these drums then and just dial this compression in. And all I look for is just probably just the needle to start to move, really. And maybe I might go to 2 dBs or maybe 3 dBs of gain reduction. It instantly smooths out that snare, which is a little bit loud in the mix, but it's just keeping hold of it and just tapping it down, and it just makes the whole drum mix feel a little bit more glued. One thing I do like to do as well is go to the sidechain filter and just dial a little bit in so that the detector circuit isn't listening to those sub-low frequencies and reacting to them. You hear how great that sounds on drums. So I can't particularly level match it because it jumps up in kind of dB increments there, but it was close enough. You got the idea. Really bringing up the in-between stuff, bringing more sustain and length to the drums. Makes the drums sound more exciting. As always, what's most important is, I've shown you isolated tracks here, but what's most important is that you listen in context. When you are using this in a mix, check it against how it makes that instrument feel in the context of the whole mix. So it's really important to remember to do that. Now, there's no right one, there's no correct application here. I just wanted to give you some reasons why you might choose to use a particular compressor type on an instrument. Make a decision and move on. That's the most important thing. Don't get hung up on what's the right one to use. Just pick one based on what we've talked about today to enhance or correct even an element of your mix. Further learning on this would be to use this lesson to try the different compressor types on one track in your mix to really hear the difference between the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. To really help it sink in, the feeling of that compressor rather than, again, the gain reduction element of it, the tone of it. So let me know in the comments, is there any one compressor that you reach for the most? And if so, why? I'd really be interested to know. Or is there a compressor that still confuses you and you don't get it? Then I'd like to know that as well. And remember, it's not perfection you're looking for here. You're just looking to build trust in your decisions, really. And when you've got more information to help you make those decisions, that confidence, that mixed confidence, can finally grow to a level where you can feel satisfied with your mixes. And you get that only by practicing and trying different things in different scenarios. If you like my style of teaching, my approach around listening and analysing sound, then check out the links in the description to my free resources, including PDF guides for compressing vocals, for example. And then I have links to my in-depth mixing courses where you just see me using these compressors and talking about why I'm deciding to use each particular type. And that may help you further understand the application of these different types of compressors. And I just want to thank you for sticking to the end of the video. You're showing up, you're willing to learn, and I really appreciate that. I feel very honoured that you give me your time with regard to that. And most of all, keep learning, keep mixing, and keep enjoying the process. If you want to see me using an optical compressor on acoustic guitar, check out this video on screen now where I do just that. So that wraps it up from me this week. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.